Throughout this series, we've talked a lot about social media, so I'm curious about this question. You can pause it and talk about it. Do you follow any famous people online? If so, who? And then let me kind of spin this question. Do you follow any famous people that you hate, but like you hate follow? So you're trying to like keep an eye on them, so you follow them not because you like them, but because you just want to have ammunition against them. So pause this video, talk about that. Is there anybody that you follow just to creep on so you know what's going on even though you might hate them? So whether it's online, whether it's in our family, whether it's with our friends, there's never a shortage of people that we love to hate, especially when we feel like there's a good reason for that hatred. And so when someone hurts us, it's tempting to cancel them by loving to hate them, talking poorly about them, dehumanizing them, and taking even revenge on them. Let me give you an example. When I was in college, I had a good friend, like solid friend. Like I met him in freshman year, and our friendship grew. In our junior year in high school, he called me and a guy into this like private room in the library. Like you could rent out rooms. And he sat us down and he's like, "Hey guys, I want to let you know I have cancer." And we were like devastated. And so like we prayed over him. We're like, "Dude, anything you need, let us know." And I was friends with his mom on Facebook. And so that night I got back to my house and I sent his mom a message. I said, "Hey, I am so sorry about the news about your son. If there's anything that we can do, please let me know. We're praying." And I was like 20 minutes later, I get a response and I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "Well, your son has cancer. Like, don't you feel bad? Like, aren't you hurting for your son?" And she's like, "No, he doesn't." And so we confronted him, and the truth came out later, and he never had it. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I thought we were friends. How could you do this to me? And like that friendship became complicated, right? Like it's complicated. When we get hurt, we want to stick up for ourselves and for the people around us. Like we want to call him out for the lie that he said, and we want to hold them accountable. But at the same time, God calls us to forgive and to share grace instead of revenge. So how do we balance accountability with grace and forgiveness? Does forgiving someone mean we pretend that how they hurt us never happened? And when we need to seek justice, like, do we have to just let something go, or how do we approach that? Last week we heard this story of David and King Saul, focusing mainly on Saul. But this week we're going to take a look at the same story and kind of focus on David. So here's a quick recap. Saul, king of Israel. David, chosen by God to replace Saul. Saul liked David at first, but then what happened was David got popular. Saul didn't like that he was looking better than him. And because of his envy, Saul tries to kill David multiple times. And he even gets his soldiers and army to help hunt and try to kill David. And we can all agree that David has a valid reason to hate Saul, right? It would be totally reasonable for David to be like, "Yeah, screw this. I'm going to go kill him." But here's what happened. So actually, I'll let you guys read it. So pause this video, read 1 Samuel chapter 24, verses 1 through 7. 1 Samuel 24, 1 through 7. So first, yes, the bathroom thing is kind of funny. Second, what? Like, not only did David not kill Saul, he didn't even hurt him. Like, he cut off a piece of Saul's robe as evidence, but felt even remorseful about that, and let Saul go in peace. Just like, this guy's trying to kill you, and you cut off a piece of his fabric, and you still feel bad about that. Like when David had an opportunity to take revenge and let hate guide him, guess what? He chose to let Saul go. And in this moment, David chose to love Saul in spite of his actions. But that doesn't mean that David suddenly liked Saul or wanted to be his best friend. However, it showed that David was willing to show love instead of hate by showing mercy instead of revenge. And I don't know what I would do in that situation if I'm being honest. Like if someone's trying to kill me and they're coming after me and I have an opportunity to take them out, like if I'm being honest, that's probably what I would do. But guess what? Like David chose to show grace and to show forgiveness. And like we mentioned last week, David and Saul never exactly reconciled. The best they could do was promise that, hey, we're not gonna hurt each other. We're gonna stay away from each other. And for the rest of their lives, that's what they did. And keep in mind, like the story we're reading is from a different time and a different culture. It's about two powerful men, not people like you and me who definitely don't rule nations and we don't control armies. This is also a story about two adults, not teenagers. So before we go any further, let's make a couple of things clear. Like the moral of the story is not to be nice to someone who is abusive and dangerous. The moral of the story is not to ask for help when you're in danger. The moral of the story is not to seek justice when someone has harmed you. If you're in that position now, or you have been in the past, when someone, especially like an adult, is harming you or is harming someone else, you need to tell someone. And tell someone right now in this room that you trust if that is the case. God doesn't tell us to put ourselves in harm's way or to endure abuse and violence. If it doesn't honor God it definitely doesn't honor God when you allow yourself to be hurt or mistreated. God loves you. God sees you. And has put these like adults and the people in this room around you to help protect you. So please tell us, like we want to help you. So I'm so glad that we can be here for you if that's the case. So if that's like not the lesson that we're not to take away from the story, what is? Like we said last week, it's helpful when we read the Old Testament, but it's also important to look at the New Testament and see what Jesus has to say. And see what he had to say about this topic. So pause this video, read Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 through 45. Matthew 5, 38 through 45. So as he often did, Jesus flipped the script. He said things that, man, it wouldn't go with what people normally would thought. And so he did. He flipped the script on the world's wisdom about love and hate. And instead of telling his audience to love those who love them and hate those who hate them, Jesus did something else. Jesus challenged them, and he challenged us to try something new. Love our enemies. Love our enemies. Wait a minute. Like, what? What? Like, what do you mean love our enemies? We're supposed to, like, hate those people, avoid those people, cancel those people. But Jesus says, love our enemies. And although David lived many years before Jesus spoke, David understood that God wanted him to return Saul's hatred with love, not with more hatred. His decision to show love instead of vengeance points us to Jesus' challenge for us to love people who we hate. Jesus is asking us to love the people we want to hate. And so, like, have you ever heard the phrase, like, turn the other cheek? Because a lot of times it's misunderstood. When Jesus said this, he didn't mean never stand up for yourself or for others, let people walk all over you. That's not what he meant. Jesus had no problem verbally defending himself. Jesus often got angry with people who were cruel and were hurtful. Jesus never sought revenge or was cruel to others or escalated conflict because his pride was wounded. But here's what I think Jesus meant when he said turn the other cheek. When someone attacks you, when they hurt you, when they lash out at you, don't be overcome with anger, right? Like Ephesians tells us that we can be angry and still not sin. I think Jesus would say, don't plot revenge. Don't escalate the situation. Don't react without thinking. Instead of react, respond. Now, I'll let you in on a little secret about Jesus. Many people think of Jesus as only like kind, gentle, peaceful, loving man, but Jesus was a revolutionary. Like, Jesus was upset with both religious and political leaders of his day. And guess what? They wanted him dead as a result of that. Jesus' enemies would try to provoke him or trap him so that they could get him locked up, arrested. But guess what? Jesus knew better, because why? He was God. And so imagine for a moment you're angry with someone, and let's just say you want to punch them in the face. You're looking for a fight. But then something strange happens. They don't want to fight back. And they don't want to hit you back. Instead, they take a breath, they raise their hands, they look you straight in the eyes, and they turn their head, and they say, all right, go ahead and punch me. You're going to be so confused. At least I would. I might just walk away because of the confusion of, this guy's crazy. And so, like, here's what I hope you would do in that moment. Stop and consider, like, what you've just done. Right? Like, stop and consider the context. Realize that if you hit them again, you're clearly the bad guy, right? Like, you hit them once, and then they stop and they look at you and they're like, go ahead, right? You're a bad guy if you hit them another time, right? Calm down, feel ashamed, walk away, right? Like, that's the power of love over hate, like, and self-control over revenge. When we react in anger, when we react in seeking revenge, it escalates the conflict. It escalates that, and it makes it way more difficult for the person who was hurt to come to terms with what they did. After all, like, if you punch them back, they'll have a reason to hit you again, and even if the first punch wasn't justified. So when Jesus is saying turn the other cheek, he wasn't telling us to just get over it. He was telling us to strategically choose love. Strategically choose love instead of hatred. Why? Because love changes things. Love changes things. So then the question becomes, if we're to love our enemies, who's our enemies? Who are our enemies? And let me ask you this question. Who are you tempted to hate because of the way they've hurt you or treated you? Who have you hurt out of a desire for revenge, and how can you make that right? How can you stop going back and forth, exchange of hatred and retaliation? How can you strategically choose to love someone that you hate? Because when someone hurts us, it's natural for us to want to cancel them, make them pay. But it's possible to hold someone accountable for their actions. So it will be challenging, but the world needs us to do this. And the most important things that we can do is we have to decide that change starts with us. And the first thing that we can do is forgive. Forgiveness is isn't something that we do for the person who hurts us. It's something we do for ourselves and for God. Whether they've asked for our forgiveness or not, we choose to let bitterness go. So you may not be ready to fully forgive that person today, but guess that's okay. Forgiveness is a journey. Start small. Begin to forgive. 2, notice. We all need people to model for us what compassion and love look like. But the good news is these examples are everywhere. We just have to pay attention. 3rd, defend. We've talked a lot about what happens when we've been hurt, but don't forget, other people get hurt all the time. You might notice someone getting bullied, or you might even get to explore deep in systematic problems in our world around us. And if you were David being hunted by the king, you would want someone to defend you as well. So we can do that for others. And lastly, pray. Like the things that we've talked about today, they're difficult. And if we want to choose love instead of hate, we're going to need a lot of help. We have to learn to pray for those who hurt us. We have to learn to pray for those who are hurting others, just like Jesus has instructed us to do. It's hard to hate someone when you consistently pray for them. And so as we close, I want to challenge you to pray for the person you're most tempted to hate right now. Ask God to help you to choose love instead of revenge. If we choose to hate our enemies, hate will continue to grow. But if we choose love and we choose to love our enemies, with God's help, that love will grow. It will spread. And I believe it will even change our culture. Like, it's not easy, but it's worth it. So like Jesus said, and like David did, God's challenging you to love people who you want to hate. Love people who you want to hate. And let me say this, just notice how it changes you. Notice how it changes you, notice how it changes them, and notice how it can change the world. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. We'll see you guys next week.